Hi, I'm Owen, the host of the Australian Finance Podcast. This podcast is proudly sponsored by BetaShares, one of the leading providers of ETFs here in Australia. Serving thousands of financial advisors and over 1 million investors, BetaShares manages tens of billions of dollars on behalf of investors right across the country. I'm proud to partner with BetaShares on the Australian Finance Podcast, Australia's premier financial podcast, because there is great alignment in the long-term philosophy shared by both businesses. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Australian Finance Podcast.
Gemma Mitchell, welcome to this episode of the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Welcome back. And you've got a new title.
Father, is it?
Father, that is the new title.
Yeah, father, dad. Very, very excited. Yeah, so for folks that aren't receiving our emails or what have you, you may not have seen. But yeah, we welcomed a little Baby Rask into the family, Charlie. So I'll leave it up to everyone in the community to guess where that name comes from. But you can probably imagine where it comes from. So yeah, Gem, excited. I've joined the club.
Congratulations. We are all so excited for you. But yeah, we're, so this has been 2 weeks now, and we at work, we were all like, we'll see how much Owen actually slows down over the next 2 weeks. And I've been very impressed that you have actually taken time out and haven't been on the emails as much. So that either means that you are taking time and enjoying it, or life's been pretty hectic at home.
Yeah, well,
Bit of both.
Becky in our team has been very quick to tell me off in a good way.
Great.
To put up barriers, to be like, no, get off. We use Google Chat, so she's been like, get off chat.
Yes.
But it's obviously, so like we had a couple of nights in the hospital afterwards and came home, and as you know, like it's a whirlwind between new life adjustment, sleepless nights, family wanting to see your baby and welcome them, which is lovely.
Yeah, that revolving door of visitors. Yeah.
Yeah, and so we're still in that, which is probably a wonderful thing. There's this really interesting thing that Warren Buffett used to say at the AGMs, which was that you judge the success of your life based on how many people and who shows up to your funeral. Like it's like, as in, that's probably a better measure rather than wealth or something like this. And I think one of the things that struck me is just how many people care about, you know, what we've brought into the world. And like even yourself, you gave us a lovely gift, and there's a lot of well wishes and those types of things, which I'm really appreciative of and grateful for. And probably the most important thing is that Charlie's super healthy, and so is Mum. So yeah, very happy.
Massive milestone. But that also brought on the topic for today's podcast, because you did a newsletter that went out to the community last week, I think it was, well, like days after the week that he was born, I think. Yeah. And it's 25 things, correct me if I'm wrong, 25 things that you wanted to tell Charlie.
Yep, that's right. 25 things I'll tell my son. Yep.
Yeah, and I think that is such an important, it's such a beautiful thing, one, that he can read back on, but it has so many different layers in it. So I thought that would make a really good topic for us to talk through. So I thought we'd pick out a couple of those. But I think you were writing this for a little while, weren't you? So this has been, you've been thinking about this for a while.
Yeah. So months, maybe more. Like obviously podcasting is a pretty big part of my routine, but I'd say that first and foremost, I'm actually a writer more than I am a podcaster. And people that listen to our podcast probably don't realize how important writing is to Rask and everyone at Rask, like yourself as well. And so writing something was really important. And I'll probably take this list that's out here, and we'll share the full 25. We won't go through all 25 today, but we'll share the article with everyone in the podcast player, show notes, or on YouTube. So if you do want to read the full list, it won't take you long. It's like a 2-minute read at most. You'll be able to get that. But you know, I'm a big fan of a writer called Morgan Housel, who many people will know. He's been on the podcast before. He's wrote Psychology of Money, Same as Ever, and a few other things. And I remember when his daughter was born, he wrote an article for his daughter, which was financial advice I'll give my daughter. And it was a really short article, and it had like 3 or 4 paragraphs. And while that was really interesting to me, I don't think, like, if people are going to this, my 25 list, and they think it's all about finance and investing, it's not. It's actually not. I didn't want to do that.
Not a lot of it. Yeah, not a lot of it is. It's life lessons.
That's it. And so I don't go into it thinking it's financial advice for Charlie. There is a section at the bottom which does have 10 different ways will help Charlie invest. So that will be in the article as well. If you want to actually understand exactly how we will be investing and how we won't be investing, and just teaching him about money, that's in there too. But yeah,
I think in your comments down there about how you'll invest, I think there'll be some surprises in there for people as well.
yes, there will be, because there's one probably or two in particular that might be a bit provocative to some people, I think. And it's quite interesting because they're things that I've thought about a lot, and I have conversations with other parents, obviously through our financial advice or through just meeting with friends and family. Things that are like pretty ingrained views of how money should be treated with a young one. But for me, it comes back to a bit of simplicity, I think, in managing money and the education around kids and money. So that's all in there. But yeah, I'm curious. I mean, I know you read it and you've pulled out a few. I'm happy to dive into them however you see fit.
Yeah, so there's so many good ones, but I definitely wanted to pull out a couple and quiz you on them. But first, like number one is you put in there, congratulations for him, you won the lottery, about Australia being the best country on earth. And you talk about this being luck, but this reminded me, a few weeks ago, I interviewed Lacey Philippich, and she said that she won the ovarian lottery with having her mum as her mum. And as soon as I was reading, congrats, you won the lottery, I hadn't seen the Australia part yet, but I was like, oh, this kid totally has to have you and Sarah as its parents. And I think, so while Charlie's very lucky to be living in Australia, I think he absolutely got the jackpot as you guys, as parents, as teachers, and money-wise, but also just life lessons. And this list of 25 absolutely just proves that point. So
thank you.
Definitely agreed with number one.
Yep.
Okay, so number 6 in here is take as much risk as you can. Just know the risk that you're taking. Love this one. Can be finance, can be life, can be lots of things. Tell us about this one.
Yeah, I think a lot of parents, I know it's early days for me, but also just people, when it comes to, say, money, if we're talking about money, they think about getting some sort of return without any risk. Or in the case of some parenting methods, it's protect the child in every single way possible from any harm at all, right? Which is kind of like a medical model for life. I don't think like that at all, Gem. I think that risk is something that you should always take, provided you understand the risk that you're taking. And so, like, for example, when it comes to money, no one likes to see the value of their money go down, right? But if you know that the reason that your money goes down is because over 10 years, you'll have 5 times as much, then wouldn't that make sense to do it every time? And so understanding the risk, is, I think, the key to unlocking a lot of happiness in life as well. And so what I mean by that is, if you go past any major river in Australia, there's always that cliche like rope swing that like leads into the water. But then there's signs everywhere that are put up by council. Don't use the swings. Don't jump into the water.
No diving off the bridge. Yeah. And then there's like 10 kids diving right next to it.
Exactly. And you see the smiles on their faces, right? Yeah. And we know as parents or as people in society that doing things like that is risky. There could be a tree stump. There could be something that's just floated there. You could, whatever, right? But like a lot of kids, I think, shouldn't think like that. I think what they should do is like, how do we make this safer? Maybe we swim down there and we test the water.
We check it first.
Yeah, check it first. Maybe that's a far better skill, because there are so many risks in someone's life that they'll never, ever be able to avoid. And so how do we teach kids to not necessarily be fearful of risk, but to think about managing it? And I think if you have a young person in your life, one of the things that I love about entrepreneurial people is that they kind of take a risk based on faith. So it's like, I know there's a serious amount of risk, but I'm going to do it anyway. And if we didn't have those people in our society, we wouldn't have innovation. We just simply wouldn't have innovation. So I think for the most part, I really want to instill that take as much risk as you think is appropriate, but don't take risks that you don't understand. And there are a lot of things in life that will they'll be able to kind of interpret that rule, and I hope maybe make a more informed judgment. And to be honest, I think it will lead to a fuller life if they do.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And there's so many times in our lives that we need to take risks, like learning to ride a bike and all of these different things. So if he can have that understanding in any child, then they're just going to trust themselves more to make decisions and be like, and weigh up like the risks and look for, I guess, the safest way to do things. I absolutely love that. And it definitely applies to finance as well.
Yeah, it does. Absolutely.
Number 10, if you have the power to help, you must, even if it costs. It's what our family does. I love this one.
Yeah, well, a lot of people say they want to help, right? I think if you asked 9 out of 10 Australians, they would say they're trying to be good people, right? Maybe more, maybe 99% of people. There might be that one rogue that's like, no, anarchy is best. It's Bitcoin or nothing, The reality is most of us want to do the right thing. But I would say that, and we do in our personal spheres and we obviously take care of ourselves. But I'd say that a lot of people talk about helping a lot of people, but not a lot of people actually do. And so the reason I think that happens is the moment that we're forced to give something up is the moment that we make a decision, a trade-off, if you will, so we don't do it.
Trade-off, yep.
This is just like an investment, right? We give a part of ourselves away in order to help others. And whether it's a bit of money that we give away, we donate to a charity, whether it's our time, we go down to the food trucks or whatever, and we try and help that way, or maybe it's something completely different. And this is like a philosophical thing for sure. And, my view has always been to try and help as many people as I could throughout my lifetime. But that's not necessarily right for everyone. I would say that some people shouldn't try and help as many people as they can, but just try and help a couple of people. Maybe it's their kids, maybe it's their loved ones. And, I think that the point that I wanted to make here is that it will cost, and it's okay if it does take something from you. Obviously, don't let it take everything from you. Let it take some of you, because that's how you have an impact, I think. And they may have a totally different perspective. But I think that if you have the choice to do something good for other people, you do it. And there's another related point in here. I wasn't sure if you're going to bring this one up, but it was actually number 2 on the list, which is treat everyone like a friend. And
people remember how you make them feel.
Yeah, exactly. And so if you treat everyone as a friend, it's in a similar vein that you basically kind of do no harm, and other people may try and do harm to you. But if you treat everyone like a friend in the first instance, I think you'll just float through life being a way more optimistic person, dealing with a few blows along the way, and trying to just be a good person to as many people as you possibly can.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I like that. The next one I had that I highlighted, it was so hard to pick like 5. Your time, effort, money, and love have limits. Invest them wisely.
Yeah. So this relates to an article that I wrote recently for our newsletter, probably about a month or 2 ago. And most people, when they think about investing, they think of like, there's probably some origin in Latin for it, but basically the idea is to take risk. So I think the origin of the word investing comes from investire, I think it is. But effectively what the word means is that you take on the risk of something and you put something on the line. And effectively, people always relate it to money when we think about investing. But it's not just investing. If you think about, say, for example, your education, we invest 12 or 13 years in children to go through primary and secondary school. And the reason we do that at the beginning of their life is so that knowledge can compound throughout the rest of their lifetime. And it builds on itself and it grows and grows and grows and grows. So we take this massive time commitment and investment and we put that at the start of their life because we know how important it is to them. We can do the same thing with, our love and our energy. I feel like that we don't have an infinite amount. And I think in this business, Gemma, you probably see this given you have quite a profile online as well, which is that you can't be everything to everyone. And I think that's okay. You just can't be. And you can go through life worrying that you're trying to, spend as much time, as much effort, as much energy on money on doing the right thing all the time. But sometimes you just can't, and you can't, no matter what someone's life circumstances are, you just can't be that to them. So I think that's okay too. But like one of the things I do in practice, and this, is at Rask, we all use our calendars a lot. We all use Google Calendars. Because your calendar, if you look back at your calendar for the last, say, week or month, it shows you what you're prioritizing in your life. Like if you have a personal calendar and a work calendar, you might end up do two, but it will show you, it will break down, if you categorize it correctly, it will tell you exactly where you're spending your time, where you're investing your time. Then if you did the same thing with a budget, like people rock up to a financial advice meeting, they're like, 20% goes to investing, 10% goes to savings. And then you're like, but why don't you have any savings or any investments? It's because retrospectively, you didn't prioritize that. You want to, but you haven't. So doing that kind of audit enables you to understand, well, what do you really value? You might want this budget over here, this 20% goes to investing, but is that really what's right for you? And sometimes it's not. And so we don't have an infinite amount of money. We don't have an infinite amount of time or love. So just be mindful about where it goes. It's hard to uncover that, I would say, but hopefully Charlie will get a few tools and tricks over the years to come.
Yeah, I think he's going to have some very good guides for that. Now, the next two, there's 2 points that I've kind of put in together at 18 and 19, and I love both of them, but which I'm going to say about all of them, right? But so 18 is hard work is a privilege, and 19 is hard work isn't everything. Work smarter than anyone you know. So they're two very different points, but I thought I would bring them up together for you to get to talk to us about both of them.
My original list probably had 50 things on it, Gem. And this one, this hard work is a privilege, was probably the one that I refined the most of any of the points. This one, hard work is a privilege, was this idea that people think that working hard for something is wrong. As in, don't work too hard. How many times have you heard that? Or that's good enough. That phrase, it's good enough. Like I say it sometimes, it's good enough, right? But good enough is not often what leads to like a remarkable output or a remarkable benefit. And I think if you think about it, in the world that we live in today, I don't want to timestamp this too much by decade or year, but we're at this moment in time where there's AI everywhere. People are using it to solve problems they weren't able to solve before, but also people are using AI to mask a lot of their own inability to deliver something. So like if you're not a really good writer, we'll just chuck in it.
You can, yeah.
An AI, ask Chad to do it, right? And so you look at that stuff, and I think if you want to become a good writer, arguably now more than ever, it's harder, because in order to work harder, you're going to have to come up against the machine to become really good at that thing. But once you start to work at it, you realize that this is actually a privilege, because I am taking something from this. I am getting smarter. And if we zoom out and we just think like globally, Australia has really low unemployment and almost always has for like the last 4 or 5 decades. And so the ability to even go to work is actually amazing. You look at Europe and places like that where youth unemployment gets to 20% or more. It's actually a real privilege to be able to work and to be able to be given that opportunity. The final thing is that hard work isn't everything. I think there's like, if you look in most budgeting books, I remember Mel Brown, who we love here, in one of her books, in the middle of the book, there was this kind of page that showed you like different money personalities and different like archetypes, if you will. And she really broke them down as different kind of like in a table format, like this one's the pragmatist, this one's the engineer, this one's the whatever. One of the things that I found that was really interesting in that book was when I looked at it and I read through it, I could identify all the people in my life who aligned to these types of boxes. And one of the things that I realized is that a lot of the generation that has gone before us, in particular the ones that have come out of having their parents through the Second World War and these types of things, they almost always fall into that pragmatist camp. Put money in the bank, pay down your mortgage, be sensible, do all those types of things. in the world that we live in, where creativity is going to be rewarded far more than ever before, I think that simply working hard is not the answer to unlocking all of your dreams. I think that you've got to work hard, but you've also got to work smart. And I think that's just a lesson for anyone in any industry is, okay, I put in all this effort, but how do I work smarter? I see so many business owners that work so many hours, but then you're like, have you just tried automating that? Oh yeah. That would save me 10 hours a week. Well, there you go. That's a really simple, trivial example.
Yeah. And that's like getting creative and thinking about different ways to do things, not just going through the motions because we've always done it, which can apply to, processes in your business, the way you built wealth, the way your parents built wealth might not work for you. Like all of these different ways, we have to get more creative. Like we've got more options than ever, but it also means that we have more opportunities and we really need to consider different ways of doing stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, there's so much we could say about that, but it's just kind of Shane Parrish, who's the founder of Farnham Street Blog, always said that he always talks about this thing called the work as in you have to do the work. Most people don't do the work is what I realized. Most people don't really want to learn something for the sake of learning it. They do it because they want the certificate or they
want
the
outcome.
Exactly. But they don't actually want to understand. And I think when you do the work, you realize that having that ability is actually a real privilege too.
Yes. And then the final one that I highlighted, it was so hard, as I said, to pick these ones, but you actually touched on this before. So this is a good one to kind of finish, I guess, the list up on, was to understand people, listen, to think better, write, because you were talking about writing before, and to learn, read.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I'm trying to find this on my list here, but it realistically, like in the world that we live in, it's become easier to consume shorter and shorter form content over like the last 3 generations. And now we've got to a point where we don't even need to listen anymore or even read at all. We could just find a tool to do it for us, basically. And I think that the more that people slow their mind down to reading, I think the more you'll use muscles and different parts of your brain. And I'm not a psychiatrist. I don't understand the inner workings. I'm not a neuroscientist. I don't understand all that. But what I do know is that a lot of people struggle to read and they quickly write it off. And there are many different strategies that you can look up. Like maybe you do read some fantasy amongst other books. Maybe you read really trivial books amongst really dense books. And there for people that are a bit more hyperactive in the mind, which I could probably say is true for both you and I, Gem, it is really hard to slow down. And there's a lot of literature out there that shows that our brain moves faster than how quickly we can read words. But the actual act of doing it is so important. And I think that's really important to gather information that sticks. But then on the other side, how do we express that idea? And the way we express an idea, Joan Didion, famous author, once wrote that I write to think. And if you've probably, everyone listening to this or watching this has probably heard this before or felt this in themselves before. When you write something out, you go, oh, that's right. Like I missed that bit, or I don't really understand that bit, or geez, I recalled that, a couple of days later much easier. And we see this with school students in the way they study. And this kind of invokes another idea, which is that from Richard Feynman, one of the famous physicists, he used to have what's later become known the Feynman technique, which is this idea that if you have a really challenging idea in your mind and you can't quite articulate it, write it down and then try and explain it to someone, right? And then if you realize that there are holes in what you've kind of tried to articulate, go back and start again and try and explain it again. And then another hole, try and explain it again until you find out what it is. And you've probably felt this yourselves as well, is that when you try and explain something to someone, you have a better understanding of it. And so what I find is this kind of technique is read to learn, write to think, and then explain to crystallize it. And that's worked really well for everyone in our business. And the nature of finance is very much like that, as are many industries. But I feel like writing's quickly becoming a lost art. And I think that reading has already been under immense strain and people are reading just headlines or short form videos or these types of things. And I just hope that I can foster some imagination with reading and writing for Charlie, because I think he'll be a better person for it.
Absolutely. Because and I'm guilty of it as well. I read for the outcome of what I want to learn. So if there is a way to shortcut that, I'll go to it, because I don't actually enjoy it, which I would if I could switch off my brain, right? And actually relax into it. But I have a million things to do. So that's something that I'm consciously trying to actually get back to. Like, just to, I guess it's like where they say it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. That's actually reading like all those filler words that we're like, oh, this isn't important, just give me the answer. It actually is. Like, our brain actually needs all of that kind of stuff. We do need to slow down and listen to all that. I love it. And the writing stuff, like I think I've told you before, when I was going through my breakup, one of my girlfriends was just like making me journal. I was like, what am I going to Dear Diary? Like, I just totally didn't really get what journaling was about. And when I started, it was just even like dot points. And the minute I had written it down, it was gone. It was like a massive just weight off my chest. And sometimes I would look back at what I had journaled, couldn't even read it. Like in legible.
Just in scratches, right? That's the thing. People think it's like a Dear Diary thing, but it could just be what's on your mind in that very, like that millisecond.
Yes.
Someone once told me, Gem, actually it was my psychologist at the time, once said that the way to think about a journal, if it's for mental health and well-being and these types of things, is to imagine that every time you break out that journal or whatever it is, when you've got that sheet of paper in front of you and you start writing down, is imagine men in little white jackets and trench coats come in and they start taking notes of all the things that you did that day, and they're going to take those ideas away from you so that the next day you'll wake up fresh and they've taken care of everything. And I imagine that every time I think about it, because it's kind of like that process, like you just described. The outcome is you write it down, it's away from your mind, and you don't have that as shallow of a sleep because it's off your mind. And that's, I think there's a lot of criticism of to-do lists, but I think that that's maybe one of the reasons that they work.
That's a to-do list as well. And that's a grocery list to me as well. Like if I'm, I don't know, like in the bathroom, toothpaste is out, my brain will go toothpaste. And it's just repeating it until I write it down, and then I stop repeating it. I don't know if that's like a mental health condition, but whatever it is, it's like I need to write stuff down and then I can relax. It's just one more thing. So yeah, I think if you can teach, like, I wish that we talked about all of these little things more, so that because we're all got these all little different ways of handling stuff. So if we can talk to our kids about different ways, like just find what works for them and find what feels natural to them, so they can, naturally find the thing that works and makes their life easier, and give some time to be able to explore and take risks and do all of these amazing things.
I realized I didn't cover one thing there, Gem, which is the listening point. And before we move on, I just wanted to mention this. So the idea of listening to people to understand them, this is one that I really struggle with, to be honest, because I feel like I'm a few steps ahead of what they're talking about without doing it on purpose. So I struggle with that. But we had a woman on our podcast not too long ago named Liz, and she said something which really stood out to me. And I asked her about it many months later, especially like 12 months later. And she said, it's kind of, I just still don't fully comprehend it, but it kind of gave me an insight into how she thinks about the world. It was a phrase that she said on one of our podcasts. She said, people are the keepers of your dreams. You need to speak to them. And I think my interpretation of what she meant by that was that people have wonderful lives and wonderful stories that they can give to you. All you need to do is ask them about it. And I think that when it comes time to listening to people, I think that's how you can truly, truly understand someone, but also understand so much more than just, themselves. You can understand more about the world and how we come to be. And I think that there's a wonderful podcast that I've listened to, maybe not more than any other. It's probably the second most listened to podcast I have ever come across, for me personally, which is a podcast episode that people can look up. It's on the Invest Like the Best podcast series, and it's with a guy called Eric Maddox. Eric, E-R-I-C, Maddox, M-A-D-D-O-X. Eric Maddox is a Chinese Mandarin linguist. He was in the Middle East during the US kind of occupation. And he was one of the pivotal people that led to the downfall of Saddam Hussein. And that podcast episode talks about listening and how all he did was listen for a few years and just listen to what people said, the stories that they told, and understood their worlds. And this was at the time people may be familiar when the interrogation techniques were like obviously super controversial and were being booted out for good reason because they don't work. Firstly, secondly, it's just a horrible thing anyway. And he was talking about how really listening to someone is actually a true art form. But once you listen to people, you truly understand who they are. And I think that if people, like I've met great listeners in my life, people that are they just really care about what you have to say, or at least they seem to anyway. And they're really delightful people to be around. So I hope Charlie's one of those people.
It totally is a skill. And I know there's a saying, or people say, like, a lot of people, I know that I do it as well, listen to react or listen to reply, like kind of just waiting for their turn. And it's really hard for them to actually take in what's being said. It's definitely a skill. I've actually noticed how hard it is. Like, so from coming on the podcast and being a co-host, I was always on the receiving end. So I was the chatter and people would ask me questions, but I realized how hard it is to be the person asking questions, to listen to their responses while thinking about what your next question's going to be that relate. That listening piece is really, it's so much more challenging than I actually thought it would be interviewing other people.
Yeah, it is. And one of the things, because you're kind of playing like three-dimensional conversations here, because you and I are having this conversation, but then there's a third person in the room listening, right? They're not saying anything to us, but they're listening to us. And we're having the conversation for their benefit as much as our own. And so that makes it really difficult. And a lot of people do that in life where they have an outcome that they want, a transaction that they want from something or someone that they've interacted with. Like even if it's old Aunt Betty at the Christmas gathering, oh God, I have to ask her about, this, that, and the other. But really listening is very different to that. And I think that podcast with Eric Maddox would illustrate how to do it.
Yeah, I'll link it in the show notes. I haven't listened to it, so I want to listen to it and I'll put it in the show notes for anybody else. Amazing. Well, we will definitely put your whole list so people can access it because they're all amazing. It was so hard to pick those kind of final ones. Is there anything else that you think like you want to share about your parenting tips or what you're envisioning for Charlie's?
Yeah, there was
Charlie's
one
future?
that I think because we didn't know the gender when he was born. We got that surprise, which was lovely. There's maybe as the father, I was maybe hoping for a boy, but I wasn't sure. Maybe there's something like that, but we weren't sure. And a few of the things on my list are to be revealed. Maybe if we have a girl in the future, but because we had a boy, there were a couple that I inserted, and one of them, which I wanted to highlight today, which is number 4 on my list, which was acknowledging your weakness is the easiest way to be strong. And I'd go on to say, and I wasn't sure whether to put this in. Most men I've met haven't figured this out. And so what I see in a lot of men in our society is I was one of these fellas, like obviously got recruited to go into the special forces and do all that sort of stuff. And I wanted to be that guy, right? More than anyone probably in Australia, maybe. And so I understand this mindset and I understand where it comes from and I understand the cultural values and the pressures that we put on young men in the way that we do, even subconsciously. But what I've realized through time is that to be really, really strong, you have to acknowledge that you're not perfect and you're not going to be everything that you maybe see on TV or on the internet or something like that. And if you want an illustration of this, I would encourage all young men listening to this and all parents that have young men in their lives is to listen to any interview that the actor Terry Crews, who plays Terry from Brooklyn Nine-Nine, he's the big buff guy. And to go and listen to pretty much any podcast that he's done, maybe one with like Rich Roll or something like that. And this is the guy that played the NFL, built like a you-know-what. He's an absolute beast, and he comes from a really tough upbringing. And he talks about it better than anyone that I've come across. And he talks about this idea that vulnerability actually makes you stronger. As a man, it actually makes you stronger. And that took so long for me to figure out. But to be like, well, I don't need the big muscles and the fast cars and the this and the that to prove that I'm strong. And in fact, if you don't think that, the moment up until that point, you will never be as strong as you possibly can be, because someone could just poke that really sensitive part of your life and your existence, and you'll react negatively or you'll fall to pieces. And I think that knowing yourself is really important. And, people these days, they give them fancy terms like know your blind spots and all these things and whatever, kind of puts a different label on it. But it's really just about knowing what could hurt you and why, and being okay with that. And I think that's one of the things that I think is going to be the hardest to teach, but I'm most excited for. So I wanted to insert that in there because of the list. That was something that got added in later once we revealed once we got the gender. So yeah, I wanted to add that in.
Yeah, I love that one.
Cool. Thank you so much for doing this with me, Jen.
No worries. This is great. This is going to be so nice for him to look back on while he can read the list. I'm sure you've got lots of stuff that he'll be able to look over of his life, and then he can watch this back. And as he's, looking at his investment portfolio.
Yeah, well, we've actually got to set that up. I've been a bit slack the last couple of days, but we want to get that started.
You did say that you were going to give yourself 2 months, and it's been 2 weeks. So you've got a little bit of time left. We'll hold you accountable to that.
We took him for his first Costco trip yesterday, Jim, and got the Huggies nappies in bulk. One of the things that I wanted to put in the email, which I don't think I did, was number 26, invest in Huggies, because the amount of nappies that kids go through is unbelievable. So for any parents.
Some things you can't do the cheap ones on. I remember my girlfriends actually, we all had eight of us had babies at the same time, and I was one of the last, and I was like the biggest tight ass, like love it because cost saving. And I think I was Audi, and they were like, Gemma, whatever you do not buy the newborn nappies at Audi. You have to pay for Huggies, and then when they get to the next size up, you're allowed to buy the Audi ones. Trust us. And I think I made the mistake once, and then I was like, okay, I'm buying the good ones, and then as they got older, I could go to the cheap ones.
Yeah, and it's that's very sage advice, at least in my early experience. So there's if you want more of an investing take or anything like that, I'd love to hear what everyone has to say. A lot of people just replied to the email or forwarded it on to me with some of their perspectives. I got some really lovely notes from people, some advice from people that was more philosophical. And I really do appreciate that. If you're in the community.rask.com.au, share anything, push back on any of the points. I haven't figured it out, so hopefully some community hive mind can help me on this journey. But I really do appreciate it, Jem, and I appreciate everyone tuning in and listening.
Yeah, well, congratulations again. So you guys get back to family life, and we will see you on the podcast next week.
Thank you. Thanks, Jem.
Thanks for watching this video on the Rask Network. While you're here, don't forget to like and subscribe so you can get videos each and every day on business, finance, investing, and so much more.